Hi, I'm Aileen, and I used to think silence kept the peace, until I found out my sister forged documents while I sat at my grandmother's hospital bed, trusting, blind. She smiled at me at the funeral, hugged me, then took everything, my home, my name, even my story. Grandma tried to warn me, in whispers, in one hidden letter. So, what would you do if the people who said family first were the same ones holding the knife behind your back? The late afternoon light filtered through Grandma Marisol's lace curtains like a faded memory, soft, golden, almost apologetic. I stepped out of my car and took a deep breath, the familiar scent of hydrangeas mingling with early autumn air. Her house hadn't changed a bit in 20 years. Same rocking chair on the porch, same welcome mat that read, "Home is where the heart is," now faded to nearly unreadable. I could already hear voices inside, laughter, silverware clinking. Someone, probably Callista, directing someone else where to set the wine glasses. I wasn't late, I was never late, but somehow, I always felt like I'd already missed something. I adjusted the hem of my cardigan, ran a hand through my hair, and pushed open the door. The warm, buttery scent of roast chicken hit me first. Then the chatter, the polite laughter, the way everyone's voices dipped half a pitch when they noticed I'd walked in. "There she is," Callista sang from the dining room, stepping around the corner like a pageant host. "You made it, finally." I nodded, offering a smile that didn't quite reach. "Hi, Cal." She looked polished, of course. Pearls, perfectly pressed trousers, hair in a low chignon like she'd just stepped out of a Southern Living spread. Next to her, I always felt like the before picture. Before the makeover. Before the success. Before being taken seriously. "Dinner's almost ready. Can you grab the napkins from the linen drawer?" "You remember where it is, right?" Her smile stretched but never softened. "Yeah," I said. "I remember." Before I could take more than 2 steps toward the kitchen, Grandma appeared like a soft breeze. She wrapped her arms around me, pulling me close, her lavender-scented sweater pressing against my cheek. "My girl," she whispered. I squeezed back. Hard. She didn't say more, just looked into my eyes like she always did. As if I mattered. As if my presence wasn't an afterthought. Then she was gone, shuffling back into the dining room, telling someone to stop putting butter knives in the soup spoon's drawer. I took my time heading down the hallway. The guest list tonight was unusual. Not just family. I recognized a couple of old church friends, our childhood piano teacher, and Pastor Jean from the old congregation. It wasn't a holiday, it wasn't Grandma's birthday. So what was this? That's when I heard it. Muffled voices coming from behind the swinging kitchen door. I was reaching for the napkins when I caught a few words. My name. "Just make sure she doesn't see the old Will," Callista said. I froze. She won't even notice. You know how she is. Quiet, always trailing behind like a sad puppy. Frame it as early onset confusion. No one will question it, especially not with the pastor in the room. Vera's voice. Calm, efficient, cold. Besides, she'll thank us one day. We're protecting her from her own poor decisions. There was a sharp click, maybe the edge of a folder snapping shut. My hand tightened around the drawer handle. My chest constricted, a slow pressure blooming behind my ribs. The napkins crinkled beneath my grip. I stepped back, quietly, and slipped into the hallway. My knees felt unstable, like the ground itself had betrayed me. Were they talking about me? Or Grandma? No, they'd said, "Old Will." Confusion. She won't notice. I gripped the stair rail and tried to steady my breath. The clatter of plates and renewed laughter drifted down the hall, distant, almost mocking. "Aileen?" Grandma's voice cut gently through my panic. She was standing a few feet away, watching me with those impossibly steady eyes. She didn't ask what was wrong. She didn't need to. She reached for my hand and guided me to the sunroom. No one followed. The shadows of dusk were beginning to pool in the corners of the room, painting everything in soft gray. We sat. She didn't speak right away, just held my hand, warm and strong, like she had when I was 6 and fell off the bike Callista said was too grown up for me. Then she leaned in. Her voice was barely a whisper. Hush, don't talk. I blinked. Her eyes were clear, fierce. They think I'm blind. I'm not. I opened my mouth, but she squeezed my hand tighter. If we want to survive this, you can't say a word. Yet. Silence stretched between us. Heavy. Protective. Binding. I've been watching them, she said, still hushed. They're planning something, not just against me, against you too, but we'll play along, won't we? Smile, nod, pretend like we don't notice. My voice trembled, but I forced it steady. Grandma, not now, she said. Later, when it matters. She stood then, graceful even in her age, and just like that, we rejoined the others. Dinner had already begun. Callista raised her wine glass. To family, she beamed. To unity. Everyone clinked glasses. I lifted mine. My fingers trembled, but I didn't let it show. My smile was frozen. My chest ached. Under the table, Grandma reached for my hand again. Held it. Warm. Steady. I didn't know exactly what was coming. But I knew one thing. I wasn't alone. 2 weeks after that dinner, I found myself standing in the back of the local event hall downtown, arms crossed tightly, regretting every step I'd taken to get there. I didn't want to be part of this charade, but Grandma asked me to go. Just keep watching, she'd whispered the day before. There's more they're hiding. Let them talk. So I showed up, and I smiled. The room was bright, buzzing with chatter and the clink of glasses. Photographers floated around, and someone was rehearsing a piano piece on the small stage. Salem's finest, I guessed. Business owners, teachers, the mayor, even a news anchor or two. And there, in the center of it all, was Callista's photo, plastered across a banner that read, Salem Women of the Year, honoring excellence and community impact. I chose a seat at the very back, less visibility, fewer forced conversations. Grandma Marisol was already there, sitting quietly in her wheelchair, dressed in beige and soft grays that dulled her usual vibrance. Her eyes drooped from what looked like exhaustion, not age. She didn't speak much, just nodded when I sat beside her. It broke me a little. Then the music started. People clapped, and Callista made her entrance like a movie star walking into her own premiere. Camera flashes popped as she glided down the center aisle in a deep emerald dress. Her hair was curled perfectly, and her smile was rehearsed with just the right balance of humility and triumph. She waved at familiar faces. She hugged the MC. The whole room leaned into her gravity like they couldn't help it. The speeches began. Colleagues praised her work ethic, her charm, her unwavering commitment to uplifting women. One woman even called her a pillar of moral clarity. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from scoffing. Across the table, Grandma gave me a tiny shake of her head, as if to say, not here, not yet. Then the moment came. The MC said they'd invited a family member to give a few words, someone close to the honoree. I felt Grandma's fingers touch mine, barely there, like a passing thought. I stood. I'd prepared something short, honest, a tribute, yes, but not empty praise. I wanted to remind people that perfection isn't always kindness, that being admired in public doesn't mean being good in private. But before I could reach the podium, a woman in a headset intercepted me. Oh, so sorry, she said, tone syrupy. We're actually running behind schedule. Could you just wave from your seat? I blinked. But I was told, yes, of course, she said quickly, guiding me back. Just smile, she'll see you. That's what matters. It wasn't spontaneous. It was arranged. I sat back down, cheeks burning. The audience clapped as Callista waved from the stage, wiping away a fake tear. The woman next to me leaned over and whispered, She's just radiant, isn't she? Must be something in your family's genes. I didn't answer. I couldn't. After the ceremony, people swarmed the reception area. Wine, cupcakes, more photos. I slipped away quietly toward the staff hallway, needing air, maybe answers. That's when I heard her. She's getting too talkative. Callista's voice echoed from around the corner. I paused, hidden. She's not sleeping well again. she told someone. Sounded like a nurse. Make sure she takes that pill tonight. Double the dose if you need to. She rambles. And people listen when old folks ramble. My stomach dropped. There was a long pause. Then, softer, she added, "We can't afford any stories from the past. You understand?" The nurse murmured something inaudible, and footsteps moved away. I rounded the corner as quietly as I could, but not before seeing her. Callista crouched beside Grandma's wheelchair, straightening her scarf like it was a task beneath her. "Don't slouch," she muttered, tugging at Grandma's posture. "It looks pitiful." Grandma didn't respond. Her gaze was vacant, distant. I stepped into view. Callista looked up and instantly smiled. "There you are," she chirped. "We missed you at the aftertoast." I didn't say anything, just looked down at Grandma. "She's fine," Callista said too quickly. "Just tired. You know how these long evenings get to her." I helped wheel Grandma toward the coat room myself. Callista walked ahead, greeting people like a queen. Grandma's hand trembled slightly as I adjusted her blanket. "You okay?" I whispered. She nodded once, but her eyes didn't meet mine. The ride home was silent. I offered to take Grandma back, but Callista said she'd arranged a nurse. I didn't argue. I drove aimlessly for a while before heading home. The streets were quiet, almost empty, like the town itself was pretending nothing was wrong. I pulled into my driveway, shut the engine off, and just sat there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment, Callista's voice, the way she grabbed the chair, the way she smiled as if nothing had happened. How many times had I watched her do this? How many times had I ignored it? I thought of birthdays where Callista interrupted Grandma mid-sentence to tell a better version of the story. I remembered Christmas when she insisted on reading Grandpa's old letters aloud, editing them to make herself the hero. And I remembered the way I'd always sat there, silent, smiling, like it was my job to disappear. But tonight, something shifted. I wasn't just angry. I was ashamed. Shame was different. Shame didn't burn. It burrowed. And once it settled, it started asking dangerous questions. What if Grandma talked? What would Callista do? They shut me out of the hospital. But they forgot. I still have eyes. And I've started to write everything down. I left the house that evening with no sleep behind my eyes. Midnight news was playing low in the background as I drifted into a fitful rest, haunted by Callista's clipped voice and Grandma's silent fear. I dreamed of hospital corridors, lights flickering, doors slamming, faces turning away. I woke when the phone buzzed, a message from Vera. "Your grandmother is in the hospital. Didn't they tell you?" My heart slammed like it might burst. "No," I typed. "Why not?" Then I dressed quickly in the dark, pulling on boots, grabbing my jacket. I drove without music. Too loud would shake me. Streetlights hovered over wet pavement. My reflection in the windshield wavered with each stoplight. When I pulled into the hospital parking lot, exhaustion and fear tangled in my chest. The automatic doors hissed open, smelling of antiseptic and old carpet. Inside, nurses bustled, wheelchairs creaked, monitors beeped. I scanned faces until I saw Callista, poised and composed, leaning over Grandma's bed. Her hand smoothed Grandma's blanket just so, her eyes courteous, almost reverent to anyone else. But I saw the tension coiled in the corners of her mouth. She nodded to a doctor, said something about keeping Grandma calm, then disappeared as soon as the visitor passed. I hovered by the foot of the bed. Grandma's breathing was shallow, her cheeks pale. There was a drip bag, a line in her arm, machines blinking. I reached out, but a nurse stepped in. "Oh, you must be Eileen," she said. "You're early." Callista turned and forced a smile. "Thank you for coming." I nodded. I didn't know she was admitted. Callista placed a hand on Grandma's shoulder. "There was some confusion," she said, voice soft like velvet. "Doctor thought maybe a mild infection, nothing serious." I squeezed Grandma's hand. "Why wasn't I told sooner?" Callista's jaw twitched. "I handled it. We were afraid you'd worry. Unnecessarily." I bit back a response. Worry was part of love. Later, left alone in a sterile waiting room, I stared at my reflection in the window. Thin outline in fluorescent light. My phone was dead. I'd forgotten to recharge. Typical. My thoughts drifted back to the paperwork Vera mentioned, the power of attorney documents. 2 weeks ago, something had changed. But no one would say what. Something legal. I pulled up the contact for the estate lawyer we'd used since Grandpa died. The receptionist answered groggily. "I'm not in. Office opens at 9. My stomach dropped. By then, legal papers are usually available during business hours. Something wasn't right. Back in Grandma's room, Callista was sitting beside her bed, holding Grandma's hand. I watched them. I watched how Grandma flinched when Callista adjusted the pillow, not gently. I watched how Callista smoothed Grandma's hair and whispered, "You're safe now." And I watched how Grandma's eyes didn't reflect safety. A nurse drifted in. I overheard, "Her daughter insisted we give her an extra dose. She gets agitated. It helps her sleep through the nights." "Is that true?" I asked. The nurse avoided my eyes. "Doctor's orders, miss." Then she checked the monitor and left, agitated. Sleep. Words that sounded like manipulation. Threat dressed as care. I left the hospital grounds before dawn, exhausted, outraged. The sun rising over Salem felt cold rather than warm. I pulled into my driveway, hunched over the wheel, hands trembling. I didn't have answers, but I had suspicion. I had proof of deceit in small doses. I backed into my driveway, closed the car door, let the engine tick down. I recorded a voice memo. If anything happens to her, this is what I know so far. I listed the names, dates, snippets. Callista's extra dose request, the doctor's note infection, the new POA papers I hadn't seen, Grandma's increasing confusion, and people arranging her sleep, her rest, as though rewriting reality. My voice shook, but I spoke clearly. I knew what I had to do next. Go to the lawyer. Demand to see the documents. I wouldn't let them twist Grandma's trust into chains. When I walked inside, the darkness of my apartment swallowed me. I flicked on a small lamp. I pulled open Grandma's old wooden desk. Papers, letters, yellowed envelopes. I flipped through them looking for signatures I recognized. Dates that didn't match. The quiet betrayal on yellowed paper. And then I saw it. A folder stamped with Power of Attorney, Durable, Filed. Dated a week ago. Callista's name as agent. My name nothing but a ghost in that document. I sank into the chair, staring at that paper, heart pounding. They tried to close me out, but I still had eyes. And now I had something stronger. Proof. I drove into the apartment parking lot under a sky so pale it looked like chalk dust smeared across a forgotten blackboard, hollow, relentless, unwilling to carry any warmth. My hands lingered on the steering wheel even after the engine coughed into silence. 2 weeks, 2 entire weeks had passed since the hospital incident, and still, every buzz of my phone reopened the wound of betrayal, sharp as glass pressed against skin. The air inside my apartment hit me differently, too loud, as though silence itself was swollen, aching with pressure. A mug of weak tea sat abandoned on the counter, the steam long dead, the taste as thin as my excuses for trying to relax. The corner lamp threw its usual golden haze across the room, but the comfort it offered was counterfeit, a staged glow over hollow furniture. I plugged in my phone, telling myself I'd avoid the spiral. But habit betrayed me. One swipe, one scroll, and suddenly the architecture of my mind was rearranged by strangers' applause, a video, a tribute, for Callista. The opening shots were predictable, her award ceremony, the shimmer of stage lights, the clean, sharp smile of someone who'd mastered the art of applause. Then came the hospital clips, Grandma Marisol fragile in bed, her hands folded, her face edited into serenity. The video framed her illness as tender, her decline as graceful. The comments whispered like a chorus, "What a devoted daughter. She's such a good caregiver. Callista's always been wonderful with family." My face appeared once, blurred in the background, my existence reduced to a silhouette in someone else's narrative. I stared at it until my chest tightened. They had stolen even my presence, re-spliced reality so that the story could belong to her. I shut the app, but the ache didn't fade. They stole my image, I thought, but they can't erase what I saw. The words tasted hollow, powerless. The tea was cold when I lifted it again. Outside, the city sighed with passing cars, each one a reminder of how easily life kept moving while I sat still. Then a buzz, a message from the church group leader. They hadn't seen me at the meetings I once led. "We've been thinking of you. Busy times." 3 dots of apology disguised as kindness. I couldn't breathe in that room anymore. I grabbed my coat and walked out, the sky weeping a mist that turned the pavement into a dim mirror. At the cafe on the corner, I ordered a latte and sat by the window. The barista recognized me, her smile careful. "You okay after all that hospital stuff?" she asked softly. I forced my lips upward. "Just trying to breathe." She nodded, didn't pry. And I was grateful, though part of me wished someone would pry, would push past the polite boundaries and demand, "Tell me what really happened." My phone betrayed me again. Another post. A photo of Grandma Marisol clasping her hands in prayer, the caption reading, "She may be frail, but her heart is strong. Callista always at her side." There they were again, side by side. My grandmother and Callista, framed as truth, and me, invisible. I left a tip on the table and walked home. The rain deepened, each drop hammering down like punctuation. Inside, I powered up my laptop, the screen's glow stark against the dim room. I dug out the old journal from my teenage years, pages stained with ink and old perfume, filled with words about being invisible, about being told I was too quiet, too weak. My younger self had whispered warnings into those pages, but no one had listened. I opened a blank document and typed, "They see only what I allow them to see. They believe the story they've built." The cursor blinked, waiting. And then I did something reckless. I dialed her. "Callista," I said, my voice steady. Her voice came polished, warm, every syllable rehearsed. "Aileen, I wasn't expecting you to call. Everything okay?" I swallowed. "Is it okay with you that when people ask about Grandma, they believe you've been with her every night? That they think she only asked for you?" There was a pause, not long, but heavy. "Yes," she said finally. "Because I have been with her. I told her I would be." My throat tightened. "Did she ask you to tell people that? Or did you decide reality wasn't good enough?" Her laugh was soft, dismissive. "You always assume the worst. Maybe I just want people to see the good around her. Maybe I'm protecting her." "By editing everything else out?" I pressed. Another pause. Her voice cooled. "Some stories need a frame. You can't always show the full canvas." I closed the laptop lid, my pulse drumming in my ears. Then I hung up. The rain thickened, slamming the windows. My chest heaved. I thought of Grandma's eyes, how they softened even when pain racked her body. I thought of Callista, her voice polished, her image curated. And I thought of myself, unfiltered, unseen, but still here. For the first time in years, I reached for a fresh notebook. I wrote, "If the world won't hear me, I'll make them listen. Not with shouting, but with proof." I wrote the date. I wrote the times. I wrote the words spoken behind closed doors, the extra dose comment from the nurse, the clipped message from the church leader, the tribute that rearranged truth. I turned memory into record. When I closed the notebook, I looked at the rain-streaked glass. My reflection looked back, blurred but undeniable. They had stolen my image, but they could not erase my memory. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone again, not erased, not framed, seen, at least by myself. I had started to write, not for applause, not for them, but for the truth. The morning sun filtered through the oak branches outside Grandma Marisol's old bedroom window, casting moving patches of gold and shadow across the faded wallpaper. The light danced, like it was trying to remind me that even in stillness, life shifted. I lingered at the doorway, unwilling to step inside just yet. The air carried a scent I had known my entire life. Lemon polish rubbed into the wood furniture, lavender sachets tucked between folded linens, and dust motes drifting lazily as though they had never been disturbed by grief or time. The floorboards creaked with every step I had taken up the staircase, familiar yet strange, as if I were trespassing in a place that had once been mine. How many times had I run up these stairs as a child, barefoot, rushing toward the safety of Grandma's arms? And how many steps had it taken for this house to stop feeling like home? Callista wasn't there. That detail mattered, though I couldn't say why. Her absence felt heavy, like it left more room for my own thoughts to echo. Vera was the one who had let me in, her expression calm but unreadable. She had given me a small nod at the threshold, as though acknowledging both permission and warning. "I thought you might like to help sort through some of this," she said softly, her voice carrying both sympathy and restraint. In her hands was a box filled with scarves, wool, silk, some with embroidery I recognized from years of watching Grandma's fingers fly with patient skill. Grandma asked me to clean up some things. I set my bag down carefully, almost ceremonially, and pushed the bedroom door closed until it latched. The room felt like a shrine. Photos lined the dresser, faded but vibrant with memory. I saw Grandma's hands in every picture, threading needles, stirring a bowl, clapping at family gatherings. My own hand twitched with the urge to pick up one of those photographs and press it against my chest, to anchor memory with touch. I caught my reflection in the dresser mirror. Hair pulled back hastily, cardigan too big, the faint hollows beneath my eyes deepened by stress and sleepless nights. I almost didn't recognize myself. And yet, there I was. The quiet one. The one who had always been compared, always been background. We began to move through the room slowly, methodically. Vera folded scarves with an exactness that felt more ritual than necessity. Letters were stacked, linens pressed into order. Everything was neat, as though tidiness itself could soften loss. I recognized a ribbon Grandma had once tied around my hair on my first day of high school. I recognized the faint scent of a sweater she used to wear while reading by this very window. And then, tucked beneath shawls at the bottom of a drawer, I found it. An envelope, cream-colored, its edges yellowed with time. The handwriting across it stopped my breath. To my little truth keeper, the nickname, the one she whispered only to me, long before Callista turned everything into a performance. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside, the paper was crisp despite its age. Grandma's handwriting, slanted, deliberate, spoke directly into the present. "My dearest Eileen, I need you to know that I saw them. The old will, the documents. I regret I waited. I feared what it might do, change everything I've kept safe. But I could not bear to see you pushed out, erased. Whatever you do, guard your silence now. Let them think I'm fading. Let them believe I no longer care. Because when the moment is right, truth must stand. I love you. Marisol." Tears blurred the ink until the words swam. I read it again, and again, needing the truth to sink in. Proof. In her own hand. This was not my paranoia. This was not me inventing shadows. It was confirmation. Love, regret, and a demand for patience all pressed into paper. Vera's voice broke the silence. "I found this behind the dresser," she murmured. "It was wrapped in cloth, like she was protecting it, even from herself." I pressed the letter to my chest. Old will, erased, pushed out. My mind raced. This was more than a suspicion. This was the skeleton in the family's closet, clothed in Grandma's slanted pen strokes. I snapped into action. I photographed the letter, scanned it, saved copies to 3 different folders. My fingers moved with determination even as they shook. I retrieved the key from a hidden drawer and unlocked Grandma's safety deposit box. The cold metal groaned as if waking from years of disuse. I slipped the original letter inside, closed the lid, and turned the key until it clicked. Not dramatic, but final. Secure. Then I turned to my journal, matching dates with events, hospital admission, the doctored tribute video, the social media posts painting Callista as a saint, the endless comments praising her as the devoted daughter. The pattern was clear, a deliberate rewriting of truth, each moment carefully pruned until nothing remained of me. Later that afternoon, I found myself standing in the dining room, Light streamed across the long table where Grandma and I once shared tea and secrets. Callista floated through, carrying a tray of cookies for visiting guests. Her smile was perfect, her mask flawless. Watching her, I understood. I couldn't stay silent much longer. I climbed the stairs, opened my laptop, and drafted an email to a local legal advisor. Need clarity on POA process and previous will. I hesitated, then attached the scanned letter. My finger hovered over the send button. But fear still pressed its hand against mine, holding me back. Not yet. Not tonight. I stood before the mirror upstairs, the letter's words echoing. This ends with my voice. Not their silence, I whispered. The reflection staring back was weary, but changed. No longer erased, something steady had awakened. I packed a small overnight bag. Vera's house would be safer. Together we could compare documents, look for other hidden truths. Evidence mattered, but evidence also needed witnesses. The room dimmed as the sun slipped lower, the clock's steady tick filling the silence. I switched off the light, leaving shadows in place of memory. Walking down the hallway, I paused at the landing. A sound reached me. Footsteps outside. Too heavy to be mine, too deliberate to be accidental. Not Callista's light tread, someone else. I tightened my grip on the bag strap. My heart hammered, but my resolve hardened with it. This would not end with my silence. It would end with my voice. I shut the laptop gently, the last words still glowing on the screen. She taught me silence can be sacred, but not when it hides harm. I leaned back in my chair, breathing in the dusk air drifting through my open window. The day had bled away. Elm trees outside tapped in the breeze, shadows stretching. I looked at the clock, almost 6, and knew the invitation would arrive soon. My phone buzzed. Callista's assistant. Celebrating legacy, a family tribute night. Your attendance would mean a lot. I held the screen, staring at words like they were threats. I shouldn't have to pretend. I shouldn't have to choose between truth and family etiquette. I typed, I won't attend, and hit send. 10 seconds later, Callista called. Her voice was polished, with that sincere candor she uses when she's hiding knives. You sure you want to look bitter? This is for Mom's memory, she said, soft but sharp. I felt rage bloom, but I didn't let it show. Then don't forget her memory isn't just yours, I said, voice calm, eyes burning with resolve. After I hung up, I walked past the living room mirror, saw my reflection, jaw tight, shoulders squared. Memories flickered. Grandma knitting at the kitchen table, me sitting nearby. Grandma reading old letters aloud, always including me. Then comparing me. Not as poised as your sister. Always half the daughter. I closed my eyes, let that sting flow through. Then I opened Vera's text message scheduling a meetup at Starbucks. The cafe where the barista remembers Grandma's favorite order. Chamomile and honey, no sugar. I grabbed my coat, headed out into the cold evening air. Rain threatened in low clouds, scent of fresh cedar faint. When I arrived, Vera was already sitting by the window, face worried in the glow of street lamps. She slid a small flash drive across the table as I sat. You didn't get this from me, she whispered. I nodded. She pressed play on her phone. Security footage. Callista leaning over Grandma's bed in the hospital, voice gentle. Just sign here. Don't worry, it's the same papers from before. I saw the way Grandma's hand hesitated, the way Callista's smile flickered momentarily, as though she was remembering something darker. My throat went dry, heart hammered. Vera watched me. I didn't want you to find out this way. Her voice cracked just a little. This is proof, I said, not rumors. We both sat in silence, the murmur of cappuccino machines, coffee grinders, rain tapping windows. I replayed the video in my mind, that moment of coercion, that gentle pressure of Callista's words like a rope tightening around trust. On my drive back, I kept the flash drive in my coat pocket, pressed against my thigh. Neon lights glanced off wet asphalt. I thought, tonight, I decide, I won't hide, no more silence. Later, sitting at my desk in my apartment, I opened an email draft to a community news outlet. To whom it may concern, Power of Attorney misuse. I typed carefully, attached the video file, then paused. My fingers hovered over send. I thought, do I want this battle public? Do I trust my evidence will hold? I turned away, walked to the window. Rain had started. City lights blurred in silver sheets. I watched a single car pass by. The world kept moving, unaffected. When I came back, I noticed something odd. Grandma's photo on my shelf was turned slightly, her eyes just off-center. A small thing, but in this house, everything small has meaning. I straightened it. I turned off my laptop. My phone glowed with notifications, messages from people I barely know. Saw your post. Proud of you. You're not alone. Thank you for speaking up. My chest tightened, then bloomed with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. I didn't show up to her tribute, but this time I wasn't silent, not even close. I had avoided the invitations, dodged the polite reminders, and ignored the whispers that circulated through the community, but the night of the family legacy event was impossible to escape. It loomed on the calendar like a storm I had no choice but to walk into. They called it a celebration. A gathering to honor Grandma Marisol, her values, her influence, her name that had become so bound up with Callista's flawless public image. But I knew it was more than that. It was the night they intended to carve the story in stone, to lock away the truth behind applause and headlines. The weight in my coat pocket reminded me why I had to be there. A flash drive, small and ordinary, yet burning against my palm as if it were alive. Inside it lived the cracks in Callista's polished facade, the kind of evidence that could silence her rehearsed smiles and scripted words. I arrived earlier than I wanted, just as the evening light faded into amber dusk. The community center was already alive with movement. Volunteers bustled about, arranging folding chairs in straight rows, adjusting microphones, and laying out programs on each seat. Someone wheeled in carts of white lilies, their sweet scent filling the air, heavy and almost funereal. Cameras lined the walls, tripods poised like soldiers waiting for orders. Reporters were already adjusting their lenses. This wasn't just a family gathering. It was a stage set for performance. And then she arrived. Callista stepped through the doors wearing a sleek black dress that shimmered beneath the lights, pearls resting neatly at her throat, her hair styled in soft waves that framed her face with calculated grace. The crowd responded instantly. Heads turned, cameras clicked, applause erupted as though the star of the evening had finally entered. She glowed under the attention, basking in it, her smile practiced yet seemingly effortless. I lingered in the back, swallowed by shadows, clutching the flash drive as if it were my only anchor. From where I stood, I could see everything without being seen. Callista mounted the stage, standing tall beneath a banner that read, "Honoring Marisol's Legacy, a trust announcement." The words sent a chill through me. This wasn't just a memorial, it was a declaration, a public claim. "Thank you all for coming," Callista began, her voice strong, resonant, meant for microphones and newspaper headlines. "My mother entrusted me with her care. Tonight, I stand before you not just as her daughter, but as her sole legal heir." A ripple passed through the audience, a subtle shift of surprise and intrigue. My stomach twisted. My heart pounded against my ribs so loudly I thought others might hear it. "We fight for legacy," Callista continued, her hand pressed elegantly over her heart. "And I believe I carry ours forward." I felt the blood surge to my face. The humiliation was scorching, choking me from the inside. Her eyes, sharp beneath the softness of her smile, flicked briefly in my direction. Not a long look, just enough to remind me she knew I was there. It was a challenge, a dare wrapped in condescension. Then came the final cut. "My sister was always creative," she said with a light laugh, "but not suited for real responsibility." Polite chuckles followed, the kind meant to flatter the speaker rather than mock the subject. Applause, small but deliberate, rose from her circle of supporters. My throat closed. My fists tightened. Something inside me, long held back, snapped. Before I could act, Vera stood. She rose from her seat near the front row, her figure steady, her expression unreadable, but her voice clear, cutting through the hall like a blade. "That's not true," she declared. The room silenced instantly. "And I think the people here deserve to know what you did." Gasps followed. Heads turned. Reporters leaned forward, cameras clicking with renewed vigor. All eyes snapped to Vera. She held up her phone, and then came the sound. Callista's own voice, played through the speakers, smooth, coaxing, rehearsed, yet damning. Words spilled into the air, persuading Grandma in the hospital, assuring her that these papers were the same as before, though something vital had shifted. A doctor's hesitant signature, Callista's gentle promises layered with deceit. The room changed instantly. It shrank, grew hotter, heavier. The bouquet of lilies, the banners, the applause, all of it wilted in the presence of truth. Callista's smile faltered. Her face flickered with panic before she reassembled her mask. "Edited nonsense," she snapped, her voice tight. "Family drama spun out of context." The audience murmured. Some gasped in disbelief. Some frowned. Someone in the back shouted, "Is this some private fight? Why involve us?" The air trembled with uncertainty. This was the moment. If I hesitated, the tide would shift back in her favor. I stepped forward, heart hammering so violently I thought it might break through my chest. My shoes echoed against the floor. The flash drive pressed into my palm, heavier with every step. I reached the reporter closest to the stage, held out the drive without hesitation. "This has the full recording," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Every word!" Callista's voice rose behind me, sharp and desperate. "That video is taken out of context." But half the crowd was already lifting their phones, pressing record, capturing the moment. Whispers turned to questions. The narrative was slipping through her fingers. I looked out across the audience and spoke, not loudly, but firmly enough that the microphones caught it. "Grandma didn't raise me to fight dirty. But she didn't raise me to lose quietly either." The words didn't feel like mine, but they carried the weight of generations, of being silenced too long. They cut the air clean. For a long beat, the hall was silent. Then the murmurs swelled again, louder, more insistent, fueled not by politeness, but by curiosity and righteous indignation. Questions erupted. What documents changed? When was she told? Why weren't both daughters included? I saw it in their eyes, the shift from passive spectators to seekers of truth. Callista tried to press forward, her smile strained, her words brittle. "Thank you all for coming," she stammered. "This has clearly become—" But then, from the side of the stage, movement. Vera helped Grandma Marisol forward, frail, unsteady, but present. The room collectively gasped. Callista's face drained of color. She reached for her arm. "Mom, please, sit down," she pleaded in a whisper not meant for microphones. But Grandma's voice, though weak, carried, "My will was never meant to silence my daughter." That sentence detonated like thunder. The room erupted. Reporters surged forward. Flashbulbs strobed. Shouts filled the air. "Where is the original will? What did she mean? Show us the documents!" Applause broke out. Not polite applause this time, but raw, unrestrained, fueled by outrage and revelation. Callista froze. Her mask cracked, her body rigid as the tidal wave of questions crashed around her. Her perfect night unraveled thread by thread. And I stood there, palms sweating, breath unsteady, but unmoving. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The truth was finally loud enough. They had tried to erase me, to edit me out of legacy, memory, even family. But tonight, with witnesses, with cameras, with Grandma's own words cutting through the noise, everything shifted. I had not walked away. I had not broken. I stood in the eye of the storm, quiet but undeniable. And for the first time, I realized silence had never been weakness. It had been waiting. Tonight, silence ended. I carried the weight of that night with me into dawn. The echoes of applause, the flash of cameras, Callista's forced composure, all of it pressed in on me. But I didn't wake up feeling crushed. I woke up feeling sharp, determined. The morning light was unforgiving, and for once I let it be. I dragged myself out of bed, brewed strong coffee, and thumbed through my emails. Messages from local news outlets. Inheritance fraud, Salem's golden daughter under fire. Allegations emerge after family controversy. And a photo of Callista's face, eyes pale, trying not to blink in the harsh glare. I sipped my coffee, letting bitterness rise. It was confirmation. What I brought into the open couldn't be quieted. Later that morning, I sat in the hallway outside the courthouse. Pink slips of sunlight filtered through sandstone windows. People in suits paced by. Reporters clustered near the entrance, cameras poised. I pressed the flash drive against my palm. I'd rehearsed this scene in my head more times than I care to admit. Then I was called in. The hearing was small, formal. The judge, a kind-faced man with tired eyes, Callista sat at a table with her attorney. I stood a few strangers back. My heart sank if I stepped too close. But the flash drive felt heavy with truth. When my turn came, I stepped forward and said, "Your Honor, this was kept in my grandmother's safety deposit box. I never opened it until now." I held out an envelope, sealed, but old, genuine, curling at the edges. The judge motioned for it, looked at Callista, then opened the letter inside. The notarized copy of the original will named me and a local charity as co-beneficiaries. Not just my name, it also mentioned her charity work, her love of community. The courtroom murmured. A cup of water slipped from Callista's table. Her hands fluttered. Lawyers whispered. I tried not to look at her face. Too many times I saw smiles where cruelty hid. The judge cleared his throat. Given this document, I must pause any further transfer of assets until this matter is fully reviewed. Relief bloomed inside me, mingled with exhaustion. Justice was stepping in. I allowed myself the faintest hope. After the hearing, I left the courthouse in a daze. Reporters shouted questions, flashing lights. I kept my head high, said little. "I only want what's fair," I said to one cameraman. Someone asked, "Did you always believe you'd be erased?" I didn't answer. I couldn't waste energy on every insult. Back at my apartment, I sat at my desk, hands still trembling. I drafted an op-ed titled, "Silence is Survival for Some, but Truth, That's Legacy." Attached the letter, the notarized document. As I typed, memories surfaced. Grandma's laughter in the kitchen, her hands wiping flour, her eyes assuring me I mattered. I didn't want my legacy, or hers, to be defined by the lies. I printed copies of the op-ed, mailed them to family members. Postage, envelopes, signatures, no fanfare. Each envelope felt like a declaration. I exist. I witnessed. That evening, I visited Grandma's grave. White lilies pressed between my fingers. The cemetery smelled of damp earth and cedar. I knelt by the stone. "Mom, Grandma, thank you for letting me see." I laid the lilies gently. The wind was warm, acting like a blessing. Under the tombstone, I whispered. It was over. But healing would take more than truth. I stayed there until dusk, letting the chilling air settle into peace. Because I knew that though some wounds would leave scars, the hardest part, making the lie visible, was done. It had been almost 4 months since the courthouse hearing. Life, as it always does, moved forward, not with fanfare, but with small, quiet adjustments. And in those days that followed the storm, I learned to notice the echoes. Not the loud ones, but the lingering kind, the type that hum in your bones after the world stops shouting. I first heard it in the silence that wrapped around Callista. Gone were the glossy magazine spreads, the photo ops, the smiles for the Salem Women of Impact wall. I saw a new volunteer photo had replaced hers at the community center, a soft-featured woman with gentle eyes, someone whose name no one remembered yet. There was no announcement, just a shift. I stood there for a while, watching the hallway buzz without Callista at its center. A meeting door opened, and she stepped out. Alone, no cluster of interns, no lipstick touched up mid-sentence. Just Callista, clutching her purse, eyes darting toward the floor as she walked out of view. There were no reporters waiting for her. No headlines heralding her next project. She hadn't been charged with a crime, not yet. The law moved slower than pain, but her reputation, her carefully curated mask, that crumbled in public silence, and I didn't feel victorious. I felt calm. It was like seeing a tree you once climbed as a child, now hollowed and empty inside. You remember how strong it seemed. You remember how it once held your entire world. Weeks passed. I went back to teaching, to grocery shopping, to tending to things that didn't make the news. But something kept pulling me back to Grandma's house, not the structure itself, but the overgrown garden behind it. I parked outside on a mild Saturday, gray clouds above, but no threat of rain. The gate creaked as I pushed it open. Her garden used to be her sanctuary. Tomatoes lined up like little soldiers, mint so thick it smelled sweet from the porch. Now, ivy crept along the edges. The soil had hardened, stubborn from neglect. I pulled my sleeves up and knelt beside the fence. My hands worked in rhythm, yanking weeds, clearing patches. I didn't have a plan, just a need to bring something back to life. The second afternoon I returned, Vera showed up. She stood at the edge of the yard, holding two mismatched mugs. "I brought tea," she said awkwardly. I paused, brushed my hands off on my jeans. "You didn't have to." "I know. But I wanted to." We sat on the steps together, the garden still halfway wild in front of us. Vera sipped her tea slowly. "She really loved this place," she said, her voice low. "Used to call it her little plot of peace." "I remember," I said. "She let me plant the marigolds when I was 6. Dug a crooked line, but she said it was perfect." There was a long silence. Vera spoke again. "I should have said something sooner. About Callista. About what I saw." I looked at her, not with anger, but with the clarity of someone who's stopped expecting apologies to heal old bruises. "You did say something," I replied, "when it counted." She nodded, slowly. "We didn't say more. We didn't need to." 2 weeks later, the garden looked alive again. Not perfect, but blooming. And in that same spirit of quiet rebuilding, I finalized something I'd been working on behind the scenes: the Marisol Santiago Scholarship Fund. Small at first, just one recipient a year, targeted at girls from underserved backgrounds who reminded me of someone I used to be: quiet, unsure, too often overlooked. The first recipient was a 17-year-old named Emilia. Sharp eyes, soft voice, and a love for astronomy. When I handed her the acceptance letter, she barely spoke. But her hands trembled as she held the envelope. I recognized that feeling. I'd lived it. There was no press release, no ribbon cutting, just an email sent to her high school counselor, and a note tucked inside the envelope that read, "You matter more than you know. Grandma Marisol believed in girls like you." In a world so loud, some things grow better in quiet. I returned home that evening, stepped into my apartment, and passed the little black box on my bookshelf. Inside it was the original letter Grandma had written to me, the one I found hidden in her scarves months ago. I hadn't read it again. I didn't need to. I remembered every word. There are moments in life when silence is protection. When speaking would cost you more than you're ready to pay, but silence can become its own cage, and unlocking it takes courage. I poured myself a glass of water, sat by the window, and watched the city lights flicker one by one. No spotlight, no scandal, just breath, just being. She told me to stay quiet. But in choosing when to speak, I finally became who she hoped I'd be. Sometimes, the loudest strength is found in silence, and the greatest justice comes not from shouting, but from standing firm in truth. Eileen's story reminds us, even when family fails you, integrity doesn't have to. What would you have done in her place? Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted the most? If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more real, powerful stories that speak to the heart. There's more coming, stories that heal, confront, and reveal.